Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for this Midmarket Reference Live event featuring Nikola Corporation. My name is Josh Coleman with the North American Midmarket Customer Success and Reference Team. So let's go ahead and do a quick round of introductions. G.R. Rodell is our SAP Vice President for the Midmarket, leading SAP teams across the Western United States. GR brings more than 2 decades as a sales leader and a leader in sales, marketing, product, and strategy roles based on a consistent focus on customer-centric business strategies, transforming teams, and driving top-notch execution. And I can attest, he's awesome. As a Chief Revenue Officer for Illumiti, a syntax company, Jamie Fryer brings nearly 25 years of experience in building sales teams and driving company growth. Fryer joined Illumiti in 2007 and is responsible for leading the overall sales strategy. Throughout his career, he has worked with a wide range of customers to help them find the best SAP solutions for their organization. His strategic innovations and business acumen drive the competitive advantage for Illumiti and Syntax. Now, our featured guest, Cheryl Tilley. She is a technology leader and sustainability evangelist with more than 25 years of demonstrated success in designing and executing strategic and tactical business solutions. She has a consistent record of rapidly turning around underperforming technology solutions, as well as developing and implementing digital transformation and business intelligent analytics that drive strong and sustained contributions to top-line growth, along with efficiency and bottom-line performance for global Fortune 500 organizations. She is currently the CIO and Global Head of Information Systems and Technology at Nikola. So let's kick it off. Cheryl, thank you for joining us. Please just tell us a little bit about yourself and Nikola.
Nikola Corporation is an industry OEM for Class 8 semi-tractor trailer trucks that are EV. So basically, we're producing battery semi-tractors and trailers. By the end of this coming year, at the end of 2023, we'll actually be into hydrogen semis. So really excited about that.
You started in the beginning of March of this year, 2022. The first vehicle rolled off the line sometime in the middle of April in 2022. And then at the end of April, there you are making a decision to make a pretty big transformation in your organization. Can you talk a little bit about that?
So as a startup, and as a lot of companies do, when they were first rolling out, the only thing they really had to concentrate on from an ERP perspective initially was finance and procurement. Because in COVID times, as we all know, everyone was anxious about the availability of parts that would be needed and, whether or not they would have what they need to build trucks. We do. What we found was that no one had really used Microsoft Dynamics for 365 for automotive, for MRP. So we started to look around to see where we could find talent. And I quickly realized there just wasn't a lot of talent out there for that vertical, that industry on Microsoft 365. And so it just became very quickly apparent to me that if we were going to truly be able to scale at the speed that we needed to and have access to the talent that we were going to need for it, we were going to have to get off of 365.
Maybe talk a little bit about your team and actually also the extension to your team who's also on the call with us.
We basically had about 10 that were really full-time on the project as internal analysts, internal functional and system analysts. They knew the processes, the business processes and what we were trying to get in, but they were not familiar with SAP. And so we had that as well as a project team there. And then we had about 10 to 14 process owners basically from within the organization across the different functions, but they had day jobs. So this wasn't their full-time, they were doing the project plus doing their day job. So we had about 24 core individuals, but as I said, nobody had SAP. So obviously we needed to get a systems implementer, an SI, that understood SAP and that I believed and that our team believed and trusted could get it done in the time frame that we had and for the budget that we had. And that's what led us to Illumiti.
What were some of the key factors in why you picked them specifically?
The truth is that I had worked with Illumiti as a customer in a prior role that I had, but it was such a great experience. I knew that we needed to partner with someone who, being a mid-market, right, you're competing against these really large companies when you start to engage with the big four, and trying to get time and attention and the right focus can be really difficult. And so I knew from the beginning that I wanted to stick with a mid-market, consulting firm that just understood us, understood our size, understood our budgets, understood what it is that we needed to accomplish, an April decision, and we wanted to start moving in May. And luckily, Jamie did pick up the phone, and luckily he did find the resources that we needed so we could, launch almost immediately.
It's the role that Illumiti played in this, as everything from the strategy pieces to the actual hands-on keyboards certainly is something we want to come to. But just before we get there, Cheryl, oftentimes when companies are considering a project with a timeline that's this tight, they have to shrink it down to one use case. It's going to be a finance use case. It's going to be really restricted use. That's not the case in your project. You didn't have that luxury. So
we had a conversation very early on with the executive leadership team at Nikola. So with the CEO and CFO and with the board, to be frank. So it was really at that level that all of us had a discussion and said, look, we've got a real diverse population out there within our ranks who have come from all these different industry players within the automotive vertical. They've all done things just a little bit different from each other. And the time that it will take for us to reach consensus across that broad base, we just didn't have that time. As a leadership team, we decided very early that, okay, you know what, we're going to use industry best practice. So, and I have to really thank Mark Russo, our CEO at the time, was very vocal with the organization to say, you're going to use as it comes out, unless you can demonstrate that indeed we're special in some way.
Jamie, why don't you spend a little time talking about Illumiti and the engagement model, especially considering this was a great example of lean IT on the Nikola side.
Truthfully, when we first heard about the timeline, we thought public cloud was going to be the right solution. We've done 3 or 4 successful projects in Germany. The challenge is that the public cloud solution is evolving very quickly, and we didn't know upfront if it could address the longer-term automotive requirements, but we decided we would need to use the public cloud implementation methodology, that 100% fit to standard approach. So basically, we were able to deliver a public cloud approach with the private cloud solution.
One of the perceptions that I often hear when talking to companies is SAP, it just seems so big. 5
of our projects last year were for pre-revenue companies. So true startups with super lean IT staffs. I think I'm not even sure that's still a perception anymore. I think there's so many smaller companies that are running SAP today that it should at least be, it shouldn't be a concern anymore.
Before we open it up for questions, a couple things that stand out. You started in March, you were making decisions in April, you were kicking off projects late May and early June, you're going live in September, you chose an implementation partner, you did all of those things in such a short period of time. Cheryl, what was the response from the company, and are there any particular areas of impact people have started talking about?
So I think what's interesting is that, again, we were a startup, we're still a startup. And so for those of you who are or have been parts of startups, you'll know that what tends to happen is you just want to get people whatever they need so they can move as fast as possible, right? So you're really just trying to get things done and trying to move forward. So we had a lot of people with all of the best intent had really pushed forward as quickly as they could in their groups. And what this did was really brought the cross-functional value stream into perspective, right? It really brought it into focus to say, that's great, you've been doing this in procurement and doing all the right things. However, how that now is impacting downstream for manufacturing and how engineering and decisions in engineering are impacting procurement. So being able to show that value stream across the entire organization and having people truly be able to see within the system how what they produce matters, how their output becomes input.
Anything that you learned along this process that you want to start to share here, and then we'll get it opened up?
Yeah, of course, there's things should have, would have, could have on some things, but I do think that there was probably a heavier reliance on our internal ERP analysts to do a lot of that testing for the functions, again, because of day jobs and other things. And that's one area that I would probably, next time I'm going to even be more focused on is how do we ensure that people in these processes are not just testing for themselves, but have they truly cascaded that down to their teams and given them the exposure they need.
Did your short implementation time include data migration from MS Dynamics to SAP?
It did. It did include that, yes.
Another question, was there any pushback on change management from Microsoft to SAP? And was there anything besides your previous SAP experience that helped give the board confidence to make the shift?
A lot of the people had not seen Fiori yet. Microsoft Dynamics works fine for finance. So for them to have to make the move over, I just can't give them enough credit that they were open to that, understanding that it was for manufacturing's and procurement's benefit. But also it was talking to Jamie and the Illumiti team and having them go, yeah, we can do that.
We'd like to take more credit for selling SAP, but I think that SAP's dominance in the space did a lot of that for us, to be honest.
You did a great job in the process. And I think more importantly, maybe than the selection of SAP was getting them to the right platform for current and future needs, Jamie. Oftentimes, fit to standard it can almost be controversial. You're telling me I can't have exactly what I want. You're telling me I can't customize everything to the nth degree.
We didn't use the word standard when we were dealing with it. And I think that was a very conscious choice on our part. So what we said was, we're going to instill industry OEM best practice. So that was always about it's best practice. By the time that we were going live, we only had 15 approved RICEF items, and we only went live with 12. And of those 12, 8 of those were just getting the Nikola logo on the forms that have to go out, for purchase orders and things like that. So, it was slim to no changes whatsoever. Relationships was the biggest part of the success of this. And I can't stress that enough. I spent an incredible amount of time going out and meeting constantly with functional heads and process owners across the organization.
What are the top 3 quantitative business impacts for Nikola?
Our scheduling agreements. So going forward, that was a big deal for us. So we had been on just spot PO buys before this. So setting up the scheduling agreement, setting it up to the forecast of our build rate that we were going to have within the plant I don't have a quant today, but what we're getting at is trying to make sure that we're not over ordering, that we're keeping our working capital to the right level based on lead times. All of that is now within the system, and we just didn't have that connection before. So that's going to be really huge for us as we go forward. Being able to now, for our planners to go into the system, be able to do more real time because it's on the hyperscaler and we're in the cloud. So really looking at where are we with shipments, can we go ahead and put it on a ship and not have to do any kind of expedited shipping, which costs, through the roof. So being able to keep those shipment costs down.
Are you using any of the Signavio tools to help identify any issues with business processes?
We are, and I love Signavio. So I'm glad we brought that up. I love Signavio. I was really super impressed. I had not used Signavio before. So in SAP, of course, we have all the processes of best practice are out there. Anyone can see them. You don't even have to be a client to see them, and you can see the process they have. And so we're making those value streams in Signavio, and we're assigning the exact processes from SAP into that so that we will have a complete process along with our integration pieces. With Signavio, you can get to a point where you can actually do some baselining across processes with what other people in the industry that are using Signavio also are doing to see kind of where you fall. Is your processes really slow by comparison, or is it about on par? So we're anxious to get into that too, but we haven't started that piece.
And if we had to go back 8 months and you had to do anything different, what would you have done differently and why?
I don't know, Joshua. Honestly, I think that it went probably just about as smooth as we could have hoped for. As is normal, we have composite rules of access for everybody. And that is our biggest hiccup right now with SOX, is just looking through and seeing who has access to do what, right? And trying to really fine tune those.
From a partner perspective, what makes a good customer?
Really strong leadership is the short answer. Transparency is huge between the two partners. I think strong leadership, having a leader who can make decisions, who understands the importance of an IT initiative and can expose that importance to the business so that we get the right involvement from business people. Assigning the right subject matter experts, right, Cheryl, like business process owners who can make decisions, especially with a fast project like this.
If I'm listening to this call, I could walk away with the impression that this is a highly funded startup that started with a blank sheet of paper, had whatever resources it would need available, and everything just went perfectly. The truth is a little bit different than that. If I remember right, Cheryl, Nikola started in 2014, correct?
Well, 2016, really.
2016. So, right. And there was an existing platform that people were marching to. And there were some practices already established that had to be changed. That's merely more the reality, right?
It is more the reality. And I would also say, though, to what Jamie just said, that I do think doing things like this in a startup, as much as there's some things you have to overcome and hurdles and whatnot, start because of funding and because of those kinds of things. At the same time, the culture of a startup is that you have to make fast decisions and you have to move fast. And so, I think having a full organization already of that culture, they're pretty fast on wrapping their heads around change in a different direction and doing, because that's just what you have to do as a startup in order to, to accommodate and to evolve.
You're shipping things across borders, dealing with multiple business entities. You've got a manufacturing process and a number of other processes that you mentioned earlier. Maybe you're a startup in culture-wise, but it doesn't look like I see customers across all segments, and let's just say you don't look like a startup, other than the culture piece.
Well, I'll tell you, when you're getting trucks off the line daily, if you go down to our manufacturing site, it looks like a regular going concern of an OEM auto manufacturer. But it's still in many ways, though, we still keep that, even though we're now into manufacturing, we don't want to just do things as everyone else has done them, which is, kind of in contradiction to just saying we did best practice. But that best practice allowed us to get the things, as I said before, that aren't market differentiating, right? Get that foundation in. We're going to do accounts payable like people do accounts payable, and we're going to do our procurement order and supplier base like people do that. And we just want to do it optimized. We want to do it as efficiently as possible. And that's why we brought in SAP. But now we've got this foundation to put in the VMS, put in these things that will differentiate us in the market, in the areas that it really matters. But we had to just get that foundation.
Are there any things that you wish you would have asked, if you're in their shoes, you wish you would have asked at that point when you were looking for a reference, when you were doing your evaluation?
If you're searching around with the different ERPs and you want someone that's exactly in your situation, that exactly overcame what you have to overcome, it never ceases to amaze me just how different our different organizations are. And culture has a lot to do with that, right? So you can be in the same industry in a very different company. So you're never going to find exactly. So I think, as you're asking for references, as I did, and you're going through and talking to people, you just want to make sure this is really important, that culturally there's a fit above all else, because things are going to go wrong and you need to be able to trust, and you need to be able to pick up the phone, and you need to be able to get a response. You need to understand that there is a network out there that's going to support you in many different ways, not just through a sales arm such as you and Jamie, but even behind the scenes and with other groups like customer success and other groups within SAP and whatnot. But you have to understand that there's an ecosystem there that you trust, that's going to be there for you and help you, because you're not going to be able to avoid having issues. There's going to be issues always. So more importantly, can you get through them quickly? Can you resolve them quickly? Can you move on quickly? And to me, that's just all about relationships and communication.
All right. So Cheryl, you and Nikola, what's next? You mentioned product lifestyle costing, integration of PLM and MES. Anything else big on the horizon?
Yeah, well, so we just recently we just acquired what's now Nikola Power. It was our battery supplier that we had out of California. Just really wanted to secure that supply chain piece, make sure that we had batteries that we needed. We have a JV, a joint venture with Iveco in Europe, and so they're going to be starting manufacturing next year. So lots of growth in that space. So what we really need to look at is, how do we have these different parts and lines of the businesses all talking to each other? And again, another piece, a big one for us that I mentioned earlier, we've got our fuel cell coming up, and now we know what we know, and we want to make sure that we're using SAP and the product costing and the integrations for the BOM. We want to use all that to make the fuel cell the most efficient build that we possibly can. And I think we're really poised for that. So very excited. And then of course we have a whole operations side that's anxious to get much more digital into Industry 4.0, making sure that our SAP systems are really tightly coupled with that, so that we can, get more efficiency gains even within our build and manufacturing process. So yeah, there's a lot of exciting things happening in the next 12 months.
Sounds like it. That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate your time. Jamie, thank you for your time as well. JR, everybody, thank you for joining us on this Mid-Market Reference Live event. If I'm sure Cheryl will be open to answering any questions if you want to directly reach out to her or one of us, and we could direct you that way. And happy holidays.